frank pace with retired New York City firefighter and Vietnam vet, Billy O'Connor.
So Billy, let me ask you: do you have every bad habit known to man?
Oh, I'm definitely indulged every bad habit known to man. And the good thing about me is I don't do anything half-assed. When I plunge, I usually plunge full speed ahead.
Because now you're vaping. What is that? Why don't you show the audience what you're vaping?
It's a little thing that you do instead of smoking, right? But I don't use it it's not in my mouth 24/7.
Yeah,
Moments of high tension. Usually when I'm talking to you.
There you go, deflection.
And I need something to calm my nerves.
And what's in that pipe?
Just smoke. I don't know what the hell's in it.
Yeah,
I'm not a scientist.
Like
Why is somebody asking me what's in the vaccine? I don't know. I just know I'm supposed to take it.
Yeah, that's.
Hey, listen, I got to tell you something. You know, I'm on a big American experience kick. I told you the other day about that New York, the 7 episodes that.
Yeah.
The last episode on 9/11 was the best thing I ever saw about 9/11. So if you get a chance, just watch chapter 7 if you want. But it's really, really good.
Right.
And you know what we talked about on our 9/11 podcast? We talked about the iron workers.
Billy. You and I know what we're talking about, but the viewers don't know what we're talking about. So why don't you tell them what we're talking about?
All right. There's the American Experience, PBS, has a documentary. It's 7 parts, so it's 7 hours on New York. It's just called New York. And the guy, Ken Burns, who did the Civil War, his brother, apparently, Ray Burns, did this one. And he's the director. But I got to tell you, I'm a New Yorker. Even if you're not a New Yorker, it's pretty much a history of the United States. It's really well done. But the 7th episode was 9/11. And one of the things they mentioned, we had talked about on our show about 9/11, we had talked about how much the ironworkers meant to us firemen. And what's his name? The great columnist for the Daily News and the Post for years and years. He's dead now. He went out with Shirley MacLaine. I just had a brain fart.
Yeah, I know who you mean too. But we both know who we mean. But the other
Life. He wrote this Drinking Life.
Pete Hamill.
Pete Hamill. Thank you. God Almighty. Pete Hamill said that he was standing at the site after the collapse, well after the collapse. And he said an iron worker walked up to a fireman and the deputy chief had said, "We cut steel. You're going to need us." And then they just swarmed down onto the site.
Wow.
But one of the iron workers, ironically, I thought you'd appreciate this, was Carl Furillo.
Oh, yeah?
The old pitcher for the
Old Scoonge.
What do you call him?
Scoonge, that was his nickname.
Scoonge, yeah, he was one of the iron workers, man. So it was really poignant. I mean, and they showed you what went in. The building itself, the World Trade Center, was being planned since 1950.
Wow.
Which really blew me away. I had no idea. And the amount of steel. And anyway, it's a really good show. I just urge our readers, if you want to learn about the history of the United States, even though it's New York, it goes right from the Mayflower, not the Mayflower, but coming into Henry Hudson, coming down with the Half Moon and onward from there. And it's really, really good. A really good series. I mean, I really enjoyed that a lot of it.
Before we go too far, our guests today are Jensen Karp and Danielle Fishel from Boy Meets World and Girl Meets World. That promises to be an invigorating interview for sure. For sure. But let me ask you, Billy, your investment in Bitcoin, how's it going?
I told you I'd bring this economy to its knees.
I saw it drop 25% last week alone.
Actually, I have a plan. It was my plan. I knew that if I get into this thing, it's going to die. So what I did is one night, I'll put $200 into it. It'll sink, and then I'll buy in. You know what I mean? But as long as I'm touching it, it's going to die. I mean, it's going to wilt.
Yeah, so it was down 25% last week. You got a golden touch. Why don't you take another hit off your nicotine?
No wonder I'm smoking. Well, I only lost $50. I mean, to me, it's a home run. I figure I'm going to save the money to get in after I sink it.
So far.
So far, yeah, but
You'll lose it. You'll lose it. Probably lose it all.
Well, Frank, at least it's a lot better than betting on my picks. You know how good my football picks are. I'm a lot better off in the stock market, I think.
Hey, let me ask you. You know, you were talking about gambling, and you were an inveterate gambler. Were you a card player also?
I was a good card player. I was an excellent card player.
We've never talked about that. What game did you play? How did you find yourself?
My two best games back in the day, you know, Hold'em wasn't a big game way back when. But when I went into I had been playing poker since I was 5 or 6 years old. We used to play 2-cent poker in the street corners, you know, like we used to play for 2 cents.
Oh, head poker, okay.
Yeah, we used to play, you know, when I was a kid. Remember I told you the story about how I met Carl Reiner. I was playing poker, and he came out. And the same thing happened with Frankie Lyman. I don't know if you remember Frankie Lyman and the Teenagers.
Sure.
They were filming Rock Around the Clock in that studio.
I remember him the last 4 times you asked me if I knew him.
Oh, okay. Frank. Anyway, I was always a good poker player, pretty good. But when I got into the service, just like anything else, you want to learn something, you read a book about it. And even when you're talking about poker, at the time, maybe I'd go to the public library, maybe there was 7 or 8 books on poker. The craze hadn't hit yet, you know, because Hold'em wasn't even on the horizon. Nobody played Hold'em. 7-card stud and 5-card draw was the big game, and I was really good at draw because I was deceptive, you know. Like when you deal draw, you have an edge when you're the dealer because you get to see what everybody else does, and you get to see how many cards they're going to take. So my move was, if one guy opened and another guy called, I would call and raise the pot. Like say it was, you know, we were playing like for $10 poker. So if a guy opened for 10, another guy called, I would call the 10 and raise 40. And then usually one guy would call or one guy would go out, and then I'd stand pat. Even though I had shit. If he took 3 cards, I'd stand pat. So I figured for a pair of aces or a pair of kings, and then he'd have to check to me no matter what happens, and then I'd bet the pot. Now, if he didn't improve, he'd probably go out. So that I do that as often as I could. So like every time he bet, I'd be pat. And finally, the guy say, "Look, you can't have that many fucking pat hands." And he'd call me, and I'd have shit. Right? And he said, "You've been doing that to me all day, you son of a bitch. You ain't never going to get away with that again." And then what I would do is, whenever I had 3 of a kind, or aces up, or good hand, I would raise the pot and stand pat. And then no matter what the guy had, he'd call me with a pair of 10s. He'd call me with a pair of, he'd call me with anything. So it was just a standard move I had. And 7-card stud is an aggressive game. And I was good at that too. Because the idea in 7-card stud is you never call. You either raise or you fold. Raise or fold. It's an aggressive game. But Hold'em comes down to that last card, that the flop, you know, that the river they call it, the last thing they turn.
Yeah. So why'd you stop playing?
Well, you know, when I came back from overseas, I was playing. I was playing a lot. I was driving out to Brooklyn to go to games, and I was playing games in backs of pool rooms, and you know, I was playing a lot of shady places. But that's where the games were.
Right.
But then eventually, I found out, hey, I can just pick up a phone about a football game. Why am I driving in the car to Brooklyn? Yeah. You know, I'm a great handicapper, and that was, of course, my inevitable downfall until I started bookmaking.
All right, so I'm going to ask you another question. Are you holding a fucking computer on your knees? Are you holding it on your lap?
It's on my lap, but it's on a box on top of my lap because you wanted it higher. Where's my fucking vape?
I was going to ask the same thing.
It looks like you're on a steady cam, for God's sakes.
Well, Frank, they just think I got the thing that Michael J. Fox has. What is that he's got? They probably think I got it.
Yeah. Parkinson's, God
help him.
Yep.
Yeah. So I'm a bit shaky.
Did you watch the Golden Globes?
No, I didn't watch it at all. Did you?
I sort of watched some of it. I read the paper this morning. I saw that Borat won, Mank won, and One Night in Miami won. And I saw all of those movies and didn't think much of any of them. Derek, where are you? Derek Harris, where's Derek?
I didn't think much of One Night in Miami at all.
Yes.
I thought it was. I thought the acting was good.
Did you see either of those movies, Derek?
One Night in Miami. That's the one with that's the Black Fellows.
Yes.
The black fellows, yes.
Yes.
As opposed to the good fellows. The black
I'm,
fellows.
I'm just trying to give you guys a reference that you can, relate to.
Well, you're saying we don't like it because there are black fellows in it? That's
well, I have
today because I loved The Five Bloods, and that had a couple of black fellows in it too.
I didn't see
Directed by a black fellow.
I didn't see The Five Bloods.
Yeah, well,
that's not about the Irish.
That was about Vietnam.
Was it the five? Oh yes, I did see that. I did see that. Those are the guys that they had a robbery going. They went back to Vietnam to rob some cash.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about what you liked about The Five Bloods, and just know for whatever reason my connection is intermittent. So if I don't answer, it's because I didn't hear. And we'll try. And then what didn't you like about the Miami movie, One Night in Miami?
Okay, well, One Night in Miami was similar to Ma Rainey's Black Bottom. I didn't particularly love Ma Rainey's Black Bottom either, because they both were stage plays. And it was shot like a stage play, and there wasn't very many outdoor scenes. It wasn't very open.
Okay.
It never really opened it up. So when I was watching it, I was aware of the fact that I was watching a stage play. And when Ma Rainey went outside, it was really, really good. And toward the end, probably 3/4 of the way into One Night in Miami, they went outside, and then it really got good. I liked in both of those films, the performances were magnificent.
Yeah, no, I thought the performances were great in One Night in Miami.
And the story was pretty good in both of those films, but they were inhibited by being stage plays, primarily stage plays first, and they didn't do as good a job as I would have liked converting that into films.
Yes, sometimes that works and sometimes it doesn't. Like A Raisin in the Sun, or you look at 12 Angry Men. 12 Angry Men was a great film, and it was, you could see it was a stage play. It took place in one room,
Yeah, and that film that Denzel did with Viola Davis, where he was the baseball player. I'm sorry.
Fences.
That was the same thing. That was a Lanford Wilson play.
Right.
And it really didn't adapt so well to the feature film format. So I thought that was less than it could have been. I really liked The Five Bloods, and I liked Chicago 7.
So let me ask another question. So the Five Bloods, did you have any reference point for that? Anything to compare it to?
No.
No. Okay. So that's probably.
But it was a really good Spike Lee movie, and he did something very unique. He had the same actors, play themselves in the flashbacks as played themselves in the future.
Yeah, we'll have to recut that because you said Spike Jonze, it's Spike Lee.
Well, that's okay. I can make a mistake.
No, you can't.
I said Spike Jonze, and I corrected it to Spike Lee.
Oh, did you? Okay, I didn't hear it.
Oh, okay. That's fine, Daryl. Just keep.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, Fred.
Hey, Frank, I got the connection right. Let me ask.
Okay.
But I think The Five Bloods was set primarily, in the 2000s, and the Vietnam movie was set during the Vietnam era, and he had the same actors play themselves both times without any makeup, and it was jarring at first, but in the end it was really good because I knew who was who.
It's interesting you mentioned Vietnam because I had just last night finished a book by Barbara Tuchman. She's the chick who wrote The Woman, the Historian.
Thank you.
Excuse me, the historian who wrote The Guns of August, which is the definitive book about World War I. And she wrote a book called The March of Folly. And she had about 5 chapters dedicated to Vietnam, how we screwed up by going in and everything else. And some of the things I read, and I've read a lot about Vietnam, really surprised me. Actually, 5 presidents bought into that. So it's interesting you talk about the five bloods because there was five presidents that we said started under FDR. That's how far it went back, the Vietnam experience. I mean, we didn't get involved heavy, but that's when the decisions were made. And the other thing was when the French decided they were going to go back into Indochina, there was a guy, General Leclerc, who was in charge of the French reoccupation of Vietnam. And Leclerc was the hero of the French resistance. And he said, this is complete folly. He said, we need 500,000 troops. And even then, I can't guarantee success. And oddly enough, 20 years later, that's exactly how many troops we ended up with over there, 500,000 troops. And it was anything but a successful endeavor.
That's for sure.
So just a little sideline on Vietnam. But I can't believe what a misinterpretation of Ho Chi Minh and that whole Vietnam experience was. She had pointed this out in the book, and I had read this before, that after they had fought the Chinese, they had been fighting the Chinese for God knows how long. And then they ended up the French were occupying them for 100 years, and their quality of life kept deteriorating. And then after they finally fought the Japanese and were our allies and the French allies in World War II, fighting the Japanese, they beat the Japanese surrender, and they say, okay, we're independent. We've earned our independence. And Ho Chi Minh went down to Hanoi in the town square. And you know what his speech was? And he sent the same letter to Truman. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and endowed with their creator with certain inalienable rights, among them life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And Truman turned a deaf ear because the French were humiliated in World War II, and they wanted to reestablish their colonies. So they thought they would give them some kind of.
How do you know all this stuff?
I like to read history books.
How do you know all this stuff? I mean, your head must be so clogged with so much stuff.
I like history. I read a lot of history. And then, that year defined my life, Frank. I mean, that year is still the most defining year of my life. I mean, I didn't see what the suffering that other people saw. But I mean, as a 19-year-old kid, and you take a guy who was never on an airplane before in his life. I mean, I was never on an airplane until I was 18. I went to basic training. And then throwed him 12,000 miles away from home in the middle of the Southeast Asian jungle. I mean, that year defined my life. So I read a lot about Vietnam because pretty much to find out what the hell was that all about. How did we do that? Why did we do that?
Yeah. Well, speaking of 19-year-olds that made it, why don't we bring on our two guests, Danielle Fishel and Jensen Karp, and talk to them a little bit about how they made it.
Yeah, I'm anxious to talk to both of them. They both seem like really interesting people, both of them.
Well, we'll find out.
Yeah, we will.
Okay, guys, they're up.
Jensen. I knew you'd be wearing a hat.
Nice.
Oh, Indian hats are good, and those are going to be out of style soon.
I know. So nice to see you, Danielle. Nice to see you, Jensen.
Nice to see you, Frank.
This is my friend Billy O'Connor, and where's Derek? Pop up on the screen, Derek, so they can see you.
Hello.
Hi, Billy. Hi, Derek.
Hi, guys.
Hello, guys. Nice to meet you. Real pleasure.
Nice to meet you.
So we got so many questions. We actually should have done this in 2 interviews. I couldn't get Jensen without asking Danielle, and I couldn't get Danielle without asking Jensen. So we got you both at the same time.
I know. He's much more interesting than I am, so I expect most of the questions to be for him.
She's America's sweetheart.
See, Jensen, you got a con already. That's good. That's the one you landed. She thinks you're more interesting than she is.
It really is. She has Patty Hearst syndrome at this point with me. She's cool with her captor.
Well, that's an interesting point. Danielle, can you talk about what it was like to have the paparazzi look at everything and every place you went and every place you what was it like to be America's sweetheart?
Well, the good news is when Boy Meets World was on the air, I didn't really have to deal with too much paparazzi. Boy Meets World wasn't as incredibly popular as you may think it is. And I think it's become more popular over the years. So while Boy Meets World was on, I got to live a very anonymous life for the most part. It was really great. I actually went back to my regular school every week that we were on hiatus. So our hiatus week started on a Friday, and I would go back to Calabasas High School, which is where I met Jensen.
Yep.
Jensen and I met in high school.
Yep.
So I got to have a very normal teenagehood, which I attribute to a lot of the reason why I've relatively remained, whatever normal is, I've been able to maintain that, I think, because I had such kind of a normal upbringing.
Well, Jensen has another fellow who had success at a really young point in his life. He was a success at 16, 20 years old?
Right.
Yeah.
20 years old. So do you think that was part of the thing that attracted you to each other?
I think part of what attracted us to each other when we got reacquainted, we met in 95 in school, like I said, and then
Kept
we
in touch a bit.
kept in touch. We were in and out of each other's lives over the years. And then when we got reacquainted in 2017, I think one of the things that we both connected over was the idea of having success very young and then watching it kind of slip away and having to reinvent yourself as something else and finding what it is that you're good at and learning how to embrace and love your past while also not making it your entire life and your entire identity.
And also everyone that I had dated or was kind of for good reason, they're in their 20s and 30s and they're trying to find themselves. And yet Danielle and I, we kind of found ourselves early, and we're still, obviously there's still work always to do, but a lot of the things that people were chasing in their 20s and 30s, we had at a very young age. So it was nice to be hey, we're in our late 30s. It's time to be normal humans and use our brains and find a person that's our partner in a real way. And I think that in a roundabout manner, the fact that we both kind of achieved dreams early, I think helped us say, time to settle down.
Yeah.
Do you think the emotional escalator that you both were on, helped you join together? You went on similar journeys.
Yeah.
That was part of the attraction.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Knowing that we had a lot of shared history without having to necessarily have been in each other's lives for that shared history. We weren't far, but we had a lot of similar experiences. Our lives were kind of running parallel, and we were having failed relationships and overcoming those. And by the time we got together, we were I've really narrowed down what I'm looking for.
Yeah, Danielle was I want to go to bed at 8 o'clock at night. And I don't.
I just want someone who's going to love me, even if I go at 8 p.m. and I wake up at 5 a.m. And he was like, you know what? I think I could get on that schedule.
I want to live like a retiree. And I want to retire, but I don't ever want to work again.
I want to move to Boca at 38.
Yeah. I want to.
Well, if she really wanted to live like a retiree, she'd be embroidering neatly, reading Heidi. Going to bed at 9 o'clock with hot milk. That's like what I do,
Yeah. Listen, we're not far. We're not far from that.
No.
Well, you are completely juxtaposed to Billy O'Connor, who found himself at 58 years old, having been a drunk, a drug addict, a retired New York City fireman, a Vietnam veteran, a first responder, and at 58 years old went back to the University of Florida, put the plug in the jug, and got a degree in journalism. So he's still looking for himself now at the age of 72. Hopefully he will find it.
I hope you never stop.
She was an adult student.
I did. I went to
I thought that was terrific. Terrific. And you know what gets me? I got to ask you this question. And both of you, because both of you have such diverse talents. You're all over the place, and I love it. You're really inquisitive, But you went back and got a degree in math, of all things, right? And meanwhile, you both wrote books. And usually people that like math like science. They're wired that way. People that like English like history. But to go from math to writing, and both of you wrote books, blows me away.
Well, my degree is in psychology, but while I was in college, I was a math tutor. That's the math connection, is that I loved math and I wanted to give back to the school that I was going to. And so I decided to become a tutor while I was there. So I was doing math tutoring, but my degree is actually in psychology. And Jensen's degree is a dual degree in writing and journalism.
Yeah.
Journalism. Well, that's the real thing to learn how to write. I think journalism gives you the tools.
Yeah.
That's what my degree is in journalism. Writing Chaucer, Shakespeare, And by the way, I saw that speech you made at Oxford, man, and it blew me away. It blew me away. You got some balls to go to Oxford and make that argument.
When I think of things I've achieved, it's so weird how little speaking at Oxford comes up.
I know.
But by the way, it's like number one for me. But for some reason, I think
forget it.
You forget it because it's so wild. You're like, oh, that was a dream, right? I didn't speak at Oxford.
Can you tell the audience what you spoke on?
Yeah, I was in the debates, which has this insane history of storied history of Elvis doing it and like all these just crazy people. And there was a fan of my book there in the booking department, and they cast me to come in and speak for an argument of who's more relevant, Kanye West or Shakespeare. And I funny enough would have obviously my thoughts is Shakespeare, but they don't allow you to pick. They give you the thing you're arguing, and so I got Kanye, and I tried my hardest to make it funny and yet still have an argument for it. But I flew out to Oxford. It was wild.
You lost his suit on the plane.
I lost my suit on the plane. Had to buy one when I got there. I had never been there. It was just a wild experience, and it's online. The Oxford people put it up.
When Jensen was talking at Oxford, he looked out at the audience and he said, "I've seen more people of color at a Coldplay concert." It cracked me up. And then the argument that he had to make, that Kanye West is more significant than Shakespeare at Oxford.
Yeah, it wasn't easy. It was very, it's so weird. It was now, I think, 4 years ago.
Yeah, almost 4 years ago.
Almost 4 years ago. And even just the discussion of rap music and race and all these things, it was been pivoting every year. And so when I went out there, and it's still, it's even worse now to have a bunch of white guys talking about the significance of Kanye West. But I was like, I think I was the only one who brought it up in my discussion, but I was like, it's worth noting that it's very white in here. This is a true milk station. And so I at least got it out of the way, and I felt like I brought up something that was the elephant in the room.
So let me ask you if you can tell our audience a little bit about who you are and who Hot Carl is, and what Hot Carl was, what you were doing as Hot Carl at Oxford.
Yeah, I as a kid, despite the fact that I don't look it, your natural normal battle rapper, I was a champion battle rapper here in Los Angeles, and I went under a bunch of names as a kid, and then I entered a radio contest here in Los Angeles back when people cared about the radio, and I competed in this battle every day where I would go up against 3 or 4 different people, and I started winning them in kind of a grandiose fashion, and I looked up and I had won for 46 days or something like that, and the record before me was 10. And it became a bit of a phenomenon here, at least in West Coast hip hop. And I walked off that radio station and signed $1 million record deal with Jimmy Iovine at 19 years old, and recorded an album. Oh, and I picked the stupid name Hot Carl in this. I don't know why. The guy on
off the top
of my head, he just goes, "What's your name?" I go, "It was the dumbest thing I've ever said." And my name isn't Carl. I have no reason to say that. And so, Jimmy Iovine gives me this record deal, and I record an album with DJ Quick and Fabulous and Redman and Maya and all these names from the late 90s, early 2000s. And I become kind of this weird industry story. I mean, you've heard 100 of them, but like very strange, where the album doesn't come out, and I was supposed to be this big blown up famous guy, and instead I'm sort of a hip hop nerd trivia question. And so since then, I've become a bit of a historian about hip hop. I know everything about it. I lived it, obviously. And I know all the trivia questions. I recently wrote a trivia game for the Monopoly company about hip hop. And I mean, that's just kind of what I've been a part of my whole life. So when Oxford was looking for experts to come out to talk about hip hop, they unfortunately went to a guy named Hot Carl. But Jensen Karp, on the other hand, was a to bring to the table.
I wish you could have seen the look on Danielle's face as she was gazing at you telling that story. A wonderful, wonderful look.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's
So
funny
grateful to have a person like that in your life.
I agree. I listen. I feel like the fact, even myself, right? Like one of the reasons Danielle can look at me in that way when I'm talking about it is because she's seen the growth of me about it too. Like it was a failure, to me for a very long time. It's like your album didn't come out, you didn't have the fame or the success that you expected. And over the years, through therapy and really starting to understand myself and face the things that at one time hurt me, now it's just become part of my journey. I wrote a book called Kanye West Owes Me $300, which is just about that journey that I've been on and the whole story from childhood on. And it's like, I'm more impressed. I don't listen to my music and think I'm happy about that, but I'm impressed by my own growth from failure as a kid into finding a new angle to go at it. And I think, that's what I'm proud of.
You have to be impressed, because if you're not impressed, nobody will be impressed.
That's right.
So I got a question from as an old timer. My idea of oldies is Gregorian chant. That's how far I go back. So when you're talking battle rap, is that improv, all improv? You're doing it as it's happening? There's no script here? Is that it?
Yeah. I mean, so when I was coming up, it was all improv. It was all not written. It was all freestyle. In the last 6-7 years, it's all written now, which is actually better, to be honest. But in my era, it was all freestyle over beats. Now you don't even have that. It's a cappella and written. But my day, yes, it was all freestyle.
So we're going to bounce back and forth between Danielle and Jensen, because Billy and my mind works sideways. We don't work linear. We're just whatever pops into our head, whatever this conversation.
When it works at all.
So Danielle, you were on Boy Meets World.
Yeah.
You were not one of the original cast members, were you?
No, I was not. I joined on the 4th or 5th episode of the first season, and it was really only supposed to be 1, maybe 2 episodes. And I auditioned for it and didn't get a call back. I auditioned for Topanga, didn't get a call back, but then the next day got an audition for the same show, Boy Meets World, the same episode, but just a different character. And this character had like 2 or 3 lines at the very end of the show. And I booked that job. And that
was like your first TV audition.
No, because I'd already done Full House.
Okay, but still very minimal.
It was very early.
Yeah.
I had only been acting for a total of 2 years, and I had mostly done just commercials. And then I had done 2 episodes of Full House, and that was really it. And so I got that role, the role that had 2 or 3 lines at the end of the episode. I don't even know if the character had a name. And I showed up on the set, and I got to work, and I saw the girl that they had cast as Topanga. And she was totally different than I was. She talked very slowly. She was just, basically she was really like my first acting class.
Right.
I watched what she did and I went, oh, no wonder I didn't get it. I didn't do that at all. I just walked in and auditioned for Topanga as if Topanga was Danielle. I just said the lines the way Danielle would say them. And look at what she's doing. Wow, that's really incredible. And they ended up firing her after the first day. And
because Hollywood is very cool to kids.
Yeah, it's a great industry for children. And they had to recast her. And Michael Jacobs said to the casting directors, well, we could either have a whole new casting or we could let these 2 girls, Danielle and Marla Sokoloff, was the other actress who was like my friend in the episode. We could let them audition and see if either one of them can do it. And I was really excited for the chance to audition again because I had really been watching our director, David Traynor, work with this girl and hearing his notes about what they were looking for. And I had that feeling a little kid gets in a classroom where you're like, oh, can I try again? Can I try again? And so I was really excited to get the chance to audition, and I did it, and I found out on the drive home that I got the role.
Well, you're enthusiastic. You're animated. Your face, you're really like, it's like you're manic almost, like you're so high, which is great.
You should.
Oh, really? That's cool.
When I hit Yeah,
I'm
at
sorry,
around
Jensen.
7:15, that just slowly falls apart.
Was the girl the complete opposite? Was she like really lethargic? Is that how she was doing the bit?
She wasn't lethargic, but the character was supposed to be a hippie child. Her name was Topanga. She was born in Topanga Canyon with two parents that were, flower children, and she left a room by saying peace, and was very like calm, and she believed in channeling spirits, and she talked about auras. So she was just very centered and very one with the earth. And Danielle is, more like this.
She's from Orange County, which is the opposite of that.
She sounded like my first wife. She broke her leg. I had to shoot her.
Married to a horse?
So that shows me something. You were one of the seminal characters in sitcom history.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And your character was similar. Was Urkel was not cast as a show. Mimi and Drew Carey was not cast in the show,
Yep.
and Fonz was not cast in the show. They were all brought in as guest stars, and they became brilliant seminal characters. And you're responsible for making a lot of executive producers geniuses that really had no concept of who they were casting in the first place. So that's
We did realize recently, because I had never watched the show before we started dating. I like aged out of it by like a year or two. I missed it. I'm so close to watching it. And we were watching one of the episodes, and I go, wait, who cast this show? And you said a name, and I go, but it says a different name there. The woman who cast
The pilot
is like the most prolific casting agent of all time. She did like Freaks and Geeks. She did all the Judd Apatow stuff, but she didn't cast Danielle.
No, I was cast by Barbie and Sally.
Sally
Steiner and Barbie Block, who
different people.
also were the casting directors for Girl Meets World.
Right.
So it was a real full circle moment for me.
wow, that's unbelievable. So now let's jump back to Jensen. Tell me your relationship with my best friend Jay Thomas.
I know it's so like when she bought your book, or when we had the book in the house, and I was just skimming through it, and I got to a chapter named Jay Thomas. I turned to Danielle and I go, that this is like one of the most important people to me. And
I didn't know you, Frank, were close to him until I read it in the book.
And she had known, obviously, my relationship with Jay. And so I grew up here in LA, and as a hip hop fan, I obviously was glued to Power 106. It was the urban station here. It was, and then there was a guy on in the morning who sounded like he hated rap. And I loved it. I was obsessed with the idea, and I loved radio at that point. I had already loved radio through Stern and through a bunch of other, my dad being a big fan of radio. And so I was like, who's this guy who doesn't even care what he's throwing to, doesn't care the songs, just wants to make good bits. And in the middle of bits, he'd be like, I don't know, there's a Candyman is in town. I'm giving away tickets. Whatever. It was like, and I was just like obsessed with this guy who didn't care about the bits, but yet was so funny. And he became, really truthfully, at that age in elementary school and middle school, I was like, if I had a career like Jay Thomas, that would be my dream, because he does morning, and then he got into TV, and he got to EP a little. Like, it was almost like there's only one guy who's done this. Mark and Brian tried it out here, and Stern is way too big for me. It was like this really niche career, and he was, to me, one of my only idols. Truthfully, one of my only idols growing up. And my book comes out years and years ago, and I get a call from my publicist, and she says, Jay Thomas wants to interview you on Satellite. And that was really only, Jay didn't care about me. It was because Shuli was a fan, and Shuli told Jay the story, and Jay's like, bring that weird Jewish rapping kid in here. And so I get on the air, and it was supposed to be like a 5-minute segment. And he held me for like an hour. It was just like he threw the show away, and he knew, like, he didn't believe how much I was into him, but like he knew I was into radio, and that juiced him, like, oh my God, there's a guy who actually wants to do good radio. And he emailed me that night, and the nicest, like just the sweetest thing. And it was, honestly, it's on par with a dad letter for me. It really was. It was like, you're on to something. What are you going to do in your life? Like, really, like, trying to figure out if I'm looking to be a personality on radio. And we would keep in touch, and he would check in with me, and he sent me his son's art book, and we talked about his career, that he wanted to get into making these, I called them dumpster houses, but he hated that. Container houses. Him and his wife wanted to make containers, and we would just check in with each other, and he would bring me on the radio all the time, and I would send him gushy letters sometimes about what he meant to me. And then he came out to LA, probably to see you, and he was sick. I had no idea. And he called me and he said, "Is there any way I can see you?" And I said, "Absolutely." I said, "I'm working, I'm creating a television show for James Corden. Why don't you come to CBS?" And, telling Jay Thomas to come to a TV studio is like not a good idea.
Yeah. It's like giving Billy a drink back in the day.
Yes. He hates TV, thinks the business screwed him. And I didn't really put that together. So I go, "Well, come to CBS." He goes, "You sure?" I go, "Oh, yes, come." So he sits down. Honestly.
And you're at the James Corden.
I'm at the James Corden show. And honestly, not a lot of people in the office knew him. The funny part is the booking agent for James Corden is the booking agent for Letterman.
Right.
That's really the only woman who knew him. Everyone else was sort of like Jensen's friend. And he helped court, like he sat down, he told stories. People were loving it. Who's this guy? And so he says, "Do you mind if I stay for the show?" And I go, "Yeah, we would love to have you." So he sits on the couch in the green room, tons of people around us, celebrities. And Jamie Foxx is the opening segment. And Jamie Foxx comes out and does a bit with James on the piano. It's great. Jamie Foxx is a superstar, and you can see it immediately. And Corden and him have this amazing singing thing. And Jay looks at me and he goes, "I've never watched this show. Is it like this all the time?" And I go, "Well, yes and no." I said, "When they have on Incredible Talents." And he goes, "This is great." And he's turning to people. He's like, "My God, Jamie Foxx and this James guy's on fire." And I go, "Yeah." And so it ends, and he goes, "Jensen, I want to thank you for having me here." And I go, "Jay, I'm happy." And you could see his juices are like, he's like, "I love being here." And so James comes out and starts to do his monologue. And I see Jay start going, "No." And he literally out loud with everybody goes, "He shouldn't do this. He shouldn't do this stuff." And I'm like, "Oh my God." Jay goes, "He should just do the singing stuff. He's not a comedian." And he's yelling it in the room. This is bad idea. This is bad. And the whole place is like, "Who is this?" And Letterman's booker is like hands in her head, like, "Oh my God." And Jay, even when I'm walking him to the car, he goes, "I don't know if you talk to the guy, but if you talk to him, he doesn't need a monologue. He's good at singing." I honestly got the best. I mean, it was like, and then he was gone a couple months later, and it was just the fact that he was in my life, Frank, is insane. I can't even, and I've worked with everyone, and the one that I think about all the time is Jay Thomas, because of what he meant to me growing up and listening to him on the radio. And like, I would eventually become a morning guy here in Los Angeles. I did 2 years on K-Rock, which was his competitor. Kevin and Bean was his competitor, and I entered the competitor's show. And even when I took the job, I heard him telling me, "What are you doing? You're an idiot. Why are you getting into morning radio?" And Danielle knows how many times in my career on radio, especially, I've went, "Well, if it wasn't for Jay Thomas, I wouldn't even have wanted this job." And I mean, that's it.
Well, Howard Stern pointed to Jay and said Jay was the motivation for his act, because Jay was the original shock jock.
Yeah.
Back in the late 70s, 70, 78, 79, and Charlie Steiner was his sports guy.
Sports guy, yeah.
And Charlie was our guest last week or 2 weeks ago, or last week, I think. No, Patrick Cassidy was our guest.
2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago.
2 weeks ago was Patrick.
3 weeks ago.
Whatever.
And he's an Emmy winner. Jay Thomas won an Emmy, right?
Won two.
Yeah. 2. I mean, it's unbelievable.
For Jerry Gold.
Yeah.
And I told a story about how he got Jerry Gold, because I was producing the pilot of Murphy Brown. And I asked Diane to read Jay. And she read Jay, and she said, "Oh my God, I loved him." And she was having trouble casting the part of Frank Fontana. She said, "If I almost debated if I wanted to make Jay as sleazy as he was."
What a character, man.
She remembered Jay when she wanted a love interest for Candace, and that's how she wrote Jerry Gold.
He sent me his kid's art book. I don't know if you ever got it, Frank. Did you ever get it?
No, I didn't think so.
I really liked it, and he knew I was an art guy, and he sent it to me. And I wish I know it's somewhere, and I'll find it one day in storage. But the inscription was, "Dear Jensen," a little bit of a paraphrase here. "Hopefully, you'll smoke enough weed for this to be good for you." And he was like, my one son's this incredible songwriter. My other son, I don't know. He's an artist. He smokes weed. I don't know. It was like, I honestly, my mom, even when she found out I was friends with him, was like, "How are you friends with him?" To me, it's one of the biggest celebrities I've ever worked with. Yet it's just someone who, like Frank and I, a lot of people know him, but as far as idolize him, it's minimal.
Well, when I met him, he was 19 years old, 20 years old. We were at Jacksonville University in college, and I was living at the Nottingham Apartments. We're right across the street from the school. I wrote this in If These Lips Could Talk. And he came driving through, and I knew of him then. We were in school like about a week or two, and I said, "Jay, do you live here?" And he said, "Yeah, I do." I said, "Who's your roommate?" And he looked at me and he said, "I don't need a fucking roommate. I'm making $19,000 a year on the radio," and he drove off. And that was it.
Yeah. Phenomenon, man. A young phenomenon, protege. I mean, just the best. Just the best.
Well, with your relationship, Frank, with Jay, does he sound like the kind of guy who would take over a movie set, a TV set, and start directing? Without a doubt, huh?
Well, not directing, just holding court. That's why that's really why I don't want to make this an interview about Jay, but that's why he didn't really get along with Robin when they were doing Mork and Mindy, because each of them needed be the center of attention. Yeah. So Billy, what else do you want to ask them?
I want to ask both of them about their books. I mean, that really interests me that both of them wrote books. And I want to ask you, I was always told, and I think it's great advice in journalism school, and I didn't get my journalism degree until I was 58. So I was a real late bloomer.
62.
And,
62.
62, really. I went to school at 58 and graduated at 62. But I was always told to have somebody from the opposite sex edit your book to get a different gender view, which I think is really good advice. Because I remember one of the books I'd written, my wife edited it, and she said to me, "A woman would never say that. A woman would never react like that. She'd tell that son of a bitch to go screw himself." And you get that different point of view. Did you guys edit each other's books? Did you?
No, it actually came out
just before
we started dating,
Yeah.
and so did mine.
Yeah.
Both of our books came out. I actually really wish, as far as my book is concerned, that I had been dating Jensen at the time, because it would have ended up being a totally different book. My book is it's a fluff piece. It's just fun. It's not anything. There's really not, like, you're not going to read it and necessarily learn anything. You're not going to read it and come away feeling like it's not.
It's a fun brunch with you.
It is. It's like having a fun brunch with a friend. And
well, isn't that's the point of the book? It's not supposed to be David Halberstam here. I mean,
right.
All the reviews I read was like a fun book. It's like having a conversation with Danielle, which is like, that's what it's about.
She wanted to make a Tolstoy. She writes like Tolstoy, and she was pushed away from it.
Yeah, it was hard actually to make it so casual. No, I think Jensen would have probably steered me at least in the direction of being able to include maybe some more just different stories that weren't, I don't know. The book would have been different, and it would have been better for it.
I'll tell you, when I read the book, which was later when we were dating, I read it on a vacation, and I said, this is all very fun, but Danielle has a point of view that is not only a 1 in a million because of her childhood, but it is so relevant, and her voice it's years ahead. And I know this sounds just because I'm her husband. It truly isn't. She talks about things that are now front and center, like the Britney Spears stuff that's also big this month, right? About how we treated her at 16 and how we sold her and how we branded her. Danielle has been talking about this, about her own life and her surroundings and her experiences for 6-7 years, and so ahead of the curve that she has friends that call her. So it's our dog. We have friends who call her.
I hope so.
Yeah, he gets very emotional about this stuff. She has friends who call her now and not apologize, but almost say the things you said I thought were.
Yeah, at the time when we talked about these things, I thought you sounded like you were living on another planet or just not based in reality. And, obviously since then, a lot of things have changed, and I've thought a lot about what you had to say, and really you were just ahead of your time in that way.
And imagine being a 14 to 16-year-old girl and them making a calendar of you, or having calendar shoots, or them writing an episode about her weight gain when she was 17?
Yeah, 16 or 17.
16 or 17. I mean, these are things that obviously in 2021 are thankfully changing, but Danielle has lived it and been in front of it and called it out at every point, and that's why Girl Meets World was such an important thing to her, to be able to help these two other girls going through the things she's going through. But that voice in a book, she was so ahead of her time, it would have been a dream for me to read.
Wow.
Well, Jensen, you wrote a book yourself. And, the way I write is I just use my own voice, and I, like Dan said, obviously, I make like I'm sitting at a bar talking to a friend of mine. I put the story on the page, and then I edit, and I edit some more. When you wrote Kanye West owes me $300, what was your process? Is that it? You just tell the story? Or?
I mean, close. I mean, I tried to sell it as a book of essays because I did fear the thing you're talking about, which is like, I'm a casual speaking writer. Like I try to make it seem like we're having a conversation, and so essays would have been very easy. And when I went out to sell it, a bunch of people were interested, but everyone was like, it has to be narrative, it has to be in order. And I was like, okay, I'll try it. And that actually helped me a lot. It was like being able to say, here's the beats I want to hit, here's what happened in my life, and letting that play out. And I didn't really have an ending, and thank God something very weird happened that I could put as the ending. And just sort of feel it out and flow. And
it was really important for him that the book was like extremely honest, that it wasn't painted as, just like the highlight reel of all the fun times he had as a rapper in the entertainment industry, that it really was like, there were some very, very low points. And ultimately he knew that he wanted the book to be about a failure.
Yeah.
And that really helped him. Truthfully, the book is the thing that really solidified my own space. Yeah, your own, like you truly internalized it and really processed it and was able to like grieve the past and move on from it at that point.
Yeah, and I was lucky enough to be interviewed by Howard Stern a few months before I got the book deal, and that was the moment that because he was talking to me about it as well, because he was like obsessed with it for a minute, and I. Being able to talk to him about it without any shame of the story or like failure feelings, and then it just snowballed into like this is all pretty fun. Like and then the journey of being like, hey, I failed, but I found a U-turn instead of hitting a wall. Like that was where I wanted the book to go.
Wow, Danielle, why don't you tell us a little bit about the Boy Meets World experience and the things you went through with the cast, and then the reboot of Girl Meets World 20 years later.
Yeah, so Boy Meets World was a really fun experience for me, probably up until about the time that I was about 18. And most of that is just because, first of all, it was my first regular job. I started when I was 12, and every day going to work felt like fun. It didn't feel like a job. Every day there was something fun and there was something exciting to do, and I loved the entire process. And then by the time I got to be 18 years old, and teenage years are hard for everybody, no matter who you are, you start to get this feeling of like, what am I going to do next? And is this really what I still want to be doing? By the time the 7th season of the show came around, I was ready for the show to be done. And so I was probably not like, I wasn't as appreciative or recognizing how grateful I should be to be working on a show that's into its 6th and 7th season. I was just thinking, what am I going to do next? And the unfortunate part of that was the harsh reality right after Boy Meets World ended was you're not going to do anything. Yeah, it was very hard. And in order to go against typecasting, everything I was offered was stuff that was, what we see a lot of now, which is like going against the Disney typecasting. And it was stuff I didn't want to do. And I ended up literally not really working at all for like 5 or 6 years. And luckily my parents were really good with my money, and my dad had invested for me. I had bought a townhouse, so I had a place to live. I had money, but I was living off of savings. And finally then I did some hosting. I did a couple really terrible movies.
You have to show the dish.
And then I started hosting at like 27 years old. There were 2 big decisions that I made. One was to get into hosting, and I started hosting The Dish for the Style Network, which was like the sister show to The Soup. And it was so much fun, and I loved that job. I also made the decision that there had to be something else out there I could do as a plan B that wasn't going to be in the entertainment industry that I would love just as much as the things I had done in the entertainment industry. So I was like, that's it, I'm going to school. And that's when I decided then at 27 to go back to school. And I pretty quickly realized that I wanted to study psychology. So that's what I started studying. So the whole time I was hosting The Dish, the 3 years I hosted that show, I went to school full time.
It's crazy.
And then I started hosting a show for MSN, finished my degree, and then was going to get my master's degree, was accepted to Chapman University, was going to be a marriage and family therapist, got my acceptance letter from Chapman University. And then Michael Jacobs called and said, guess what? We're going back. We're doing it again.
And that's before like reboots were a thing.
Yeah, Girl Meets World was truthfully like the first reboot.
Yeah.
Yes, it was.
And so I was like, wait, what? What are you talking about? Explain this to me. How is it going to work? And Michael, Michael had in his mind already, he knew what every character was going to do. If this character is going to do this, and this character is going to do this, and then this character is going to happen this, and then Sean is going to come back, and he's going to end up marrying, Maya's not going to have a dad, and he's going to marry Maya's mother, and like he already knew exactly what was going to happen over all the seasons of the show, regardless of how that all ended up changing. And I remember that the very first thing I said to him was, if we are doing this show with a young girl as the lead in the Corey character, I just want you to promise me that the romantic relationships are not going to be the focal point of her show the same way Topanga was for Corey. I don't want there to be a boy that is the Topanga to Corey. I want her to have her friends be her main interest, and her career and school and all those things. I don't want romantic relationships involved. And he assured me that wasn't going to be the case. And then it was really what the pilot was about. So
Michael would say anything at any time to close a deal.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hey, before you continue, Derek, I can't see anybody but Billy. I'm sure everything's fine in the room where you're recording this, but I can't see anybody but Billy. So know that. So when Girl Meets World came about, first of all, how was your relationship with Ben and Ryder and all the cast on Girl Meets World, and then on Boy Meets World, and then go later on with Rowan and Sabrina on Girl Meets World?
Yeah, well, we had, over the years, similarly to the way Jensen and I were in and out of each other's lives since high school, the Boy Meets World cast was no different. There would be times where we would get together, Ben, Ryder, and I, and Will would, get together for dinners occasionally, and sometimes someone would be able to show up, or sometimes it was just 2 or 3 of us, sometimes it was all of us. We were all in and out of each other's lives. And knowing I was going back to Boy Meets World and was going to be working with Ben, my first thought was, this is going to be so much fun. It's going to be exactly like the way it felt going back to, doing Boy Meets World. It's going to be exactly the same thing. We're older, we're professionals. We're going to be, responsible. We get to be these, we're going to be these like examples for these kids that are the same age we were when we started. Like, I had all these really lofty ideas. Also, something that's important to know, when you are a working teenager and you work around a lot of adults, it's very easy to idolize them and think that they are infallible. and to think that they would never lie to you, and to think that they have all the answers, and to think that they always have your best interest in mind.
Well, yeah, one day you're auditioning and the next day you're on television
Right.
and you're 11. I mean, it's like that person is God, right?
Well, and that person maybe has a tendency to tell you how much they have your best interest in mind, and I would never do anything to steer you wrong. And, you know, that is the relationship I had remembered with all of the people in positions of power that I worked with from Boy Meets World. And so going back to that, I had no reason to think that Girl Meets World was going to be any different. I just thought, this is going to be great. I love all these people. This is going to be really fun. And then it's not that it wasn't fun. There were times that it was fun, but I don't think the environment was, I had been out of the entertainment industry for a long time, other than hosting. I had not been on a set as an actor in a long time. And I was now coming into it with a very mature.
Hey, I mean, 30-something-year-old eyes.
Yeah, I was a mid 30-year-old woman, and I was coming into it, and suddenly I saw the environment being on the set, and it just wasn't, there were a lot of things that it left to be desired, and I didn't hesitate to speak up. I wanted to protect the kids as much as I could. I wanted to protect our crew as much as we could. I wanted to protect myself as much as I could. And I saw that there were just, you know, there were a lot of politics that went on. And I probably did not make a lot of friends on that show because I didn't keep my mouth shut. I really said a lot of things, and I would fight for what I wanted. And at the end of the day, I would recognize I don't have the power to change this situation. I can only do everything that I could possibly do in my power. And if it still doesn't work out, at least I can't look back and say, well, I didn't do enough. I tried.
And you always did enough because, you know, two of the people that were always fighting, and I want to say with Michael, were you and me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, you know, Danielle, I got to really say the insight of what you just said about being young and idolizing people that are older than you and always thinking that they know what they're talking about. That's how I ended up in Vietnam.
Yeah.
That same attitude. You know, they're young kids, 18, 19. That's who goes, because they look at the people making the decisions and say, well, they must know what they're doing. Yeah. But I got to tell you, I admire your attitude, because when I was reading about your work with Children's Hospital, you made a comment that really blew me away. And you said it was selfish of you to work with Children's Hospital because how good it makes you feel.
Yeah.
And I gotta tell you, that blew me away.
Billy, before you go on, why don't you mention why she was working with Children's Hospital and give our audience some background, what you know.
Well, why don't I let Danielle tell us why she was working with Children's Hospital?
Hey, you're learning.
Yeah, you see, it's not about me, Frank.
It's selfish of us to say it to you.
No, but it really blew me away, and I just want to tell you how much I admired that statement, because it was really insightful. And please tell us why.
Thank you. Well, you know, Jensen and I have a lot of things that we together are proud of, but our number one pride and joy is our son that we share, named Adler. And
20 months when we're doing this.
Yeah, he's 20 months now. And so we got married in 2018, and shortly thereafter we learned we were pregnant. And I had looked forward to this moment my entire life. I am a very type A, controlling. I have a plan. I had a full plan and everything about the way I thought my pregnancy was going to go, and my birth plan. And I worked up until I was 36 weeks pregnant, and then I was going to take the last 4 weeks off. And that was when I was going to finish the nursery and do all that.
And this is directing now. She's gotten into directing kids television.
So. Yeah, so Girl Meets World is actually where I got my start doing that. Michael let me direct an episode, and then I got to direct a few more. And since then, I've turned it into a full-time job, and I'm incredibly grateful that Frank has been my number one advocate in that. But we can talk about that another time. But Frank knows how much I owe him as far as my directing career goes. But so I was directing, and I was just shy of 36 weeks. And it was a Thursday night, and I had a live studio audience taping the next day of Raven's Home, which was the show I was directing at the time. And I came home from work that night, and it was the premiere of Holy Moly on ABC. I'll never forget. And
I don't even know why we watched it.
I don't either. We rarely watch anything.
We barely watch TV, but I think I was like, it's miniature golf. I don't know why. I convinced her to watch it with me.
And so. I was dealing with like pregnancy swelling, which I hadn't really had. My ankles were so swollen that day. And I was like, yes, I'm going to kick my feet up and let's watch Holy Moly. And about the minute Holy Moly ended, my water broke. And
yes, we didn't even think it was, it was like.
We didn't know exactly what was happening. And then I was like, oh, I think I'm about to have the baby.
Jeff Perry gets an assist.
Yeah, my first phone call was the camera coordinator. My very first call was the camera coordinator. Yeah. And I said, Linda, a wonderful, wonderful woman who's now an extremely successful director herself, Linda Tarek. I said, Linda, can you direct the show for me tomorrow? I'm going to be going to the hospital. And she said, absolutely, anything you need, I'm there for you. And I said, great. I even left I had left my notebook at work, which I had never done. I was like, my notebook's there, all my shots, and everything's in there.
And we assume this is like totally normal. We're going to be fine. Like, we're just going to go have a baby.
Yeah, I'm just excited. Wow, he's coming 4 weeks early, but oh well, like that happens. It's not a big deal. And we went to the hospital, and then they told us it was a much bigger deal than we thought. So our son had something, it's very, very rare, but it is called congenital chylothorax.
Which is basically like a buildup of liquid.
It's a buildup of lymphatic fluid between the lung and the lung cavity.
And they were checking the sonogram, and Danielle's, she's laying down, and I saw the doctor's face, and I knew something was wrong, and I saw her double checking and triple checking. And, you just never expect it. Like we were laughing 5 seconds before. And then just everything turned. Wow. It was like all the plans were gone. Everything was gone. They were talking to us about if he comes out not breathing, and
there was a triage set up in my delivery room, and they had a helicopter waiting on the roof.
It was crazy. And then they put her on these meds so that the baby, we wanted him to basically incubate for as long as possible in Danielle to develop as much as he can. So they started giving her meds so that she wouldn't give birth. And
they stopped my labor and were making sure that Adler could get enough steroid shots to develop his lungs more. And so I was in the hospital on all those meds from Thursday night until Monday morning. And then on Monday morning, he was finally delivered. And thankfully, he was breathing.
He was breathing, yeah.
And he was taken immediately to the NICU, where he spent the next 12 days at Tarzana Hospital NICU. And then his fluid in his lungs was getting worse. So we took an ambulance to Children's Hospital, and he spent the next 10 days there.
And Children's Hospital for us was it was supposed to be the worst case scenario. It was like, well, if we need to tap the liquid out of his side of his body, we're going to end up at Children's Hospital. So I'm having an actual mental breakdown while they're ambulancing him. Danielle's keeping the family together by going on the ambulance. And when we got to Children's Hospital, it was the exact opposite feeling.
Very calm.
Where we thought it was going to be the end of our lives, it was instead a bunch of people being like, I think he's going to be okay. And it was like,
wow.
It felt like home. It felt warm, and it was just like they took us in, and Danielle always says these NICUs, they're treating the parents as much as they're treating your child, because our child can't talk. So it's like we're the only ones speaking for him, advocating for him, and so they have to deal with us, and they have to take care of our emotions, and fast forward to the idea that they just kept an eye on him. We ended up there for a total of about 3 more weeks.
No,
Two more weeks?
No, 10 days.
10 days. Well,
it feels like a very long time.
A year. Yeah, and so we ended up there for about a little bit of a week and a half. And during that time, they just kept an eye on him and did all the things they need to do. They didn't have to tap him. They didn't have to do any of the stuff. They just got to let him develop and stay the course, and a couple meds here and there and things like that. And now we have a completely healthy 20-month-old.
Oh, wow. Thank God.
Congratulations.
Oh, it's so frightening. What an experience. I mean, just blows you away. But the professionalism of the people at Children's Hospital, right place, right time. The whole difference.
It's the best in the world. The fact that we grew up even near it is like, now to me, it's like it should be a museum. It's like,
Yeah, it's
what they did for Jimmy Kimmel's kid and what they've done for so many people that we've heard or we know. We are just blown away by that, and we'll do anything for them. So whenever Danielle is called for charity, or when I was on the radio, I was talking about them all the time.
yeah.
And so, I mean, you know, they're an independent children's hospital that also is, in case of an emergency, an earthquake or whatever, no matter what age, we're going to end up there because they're a trauma center. So it's a beautiful space.
Ironically, my granddaughter was there 10 days ago because she contracted chickenpox.
Oh.
And she got some chickenpox near her eye.
Oh,
And she had to have her eyes dilated. They had to call an ophthalmologist. And Aaron's was, you know, the eye is fine and the ear is fine. But it was, you know, touch and go there for a while. So we're grateful to them as well. You mentioned Kimmel. Kimmel was a good friend of Don Rickles.
Yeah.
And I understand that Jensen may have a tattoo of Don Rickles.
I have
It's
Don
so
Rickles.
good. Stand up,
I
stand up,
don't know if
Tom.
you can see it, can you? I mean, it'll look weird, I think, on the.
That's unbelievable.
I luckily never met Don Rickles. I never wanted to meet him. It was not someone I was trying to work with or meet or anything.
Too important to you.
Too important.
No. Okay. I'm going to tell you that I grew up idolizing Don. And when I met him, he was everything I hoped for and more.
Yeah.
And he's the only man that I've ever met that I could say never met a man who could say anything bad about Don Rickles.
That's what I heard.
Was the sweetest, most lovable man. I value the 13 episodes I did with him. He was just a great, great human being, and you couldn't have better two idols than Don Rickles and Jay Thomas. Let me tell you.
I know, those were two of my biggies, man. And the crazy part too is like we had mutual friends. Either Kimmel, I wouldn't say Kimmel's a friend. He's a guy I've worked with, but like John Mayer is a friend, and he's very close with Rickles. And Bob Saget obviously is a friend of Danielle's and was very close to Don. And so I got to see him perform. Unfortunately, a little too late in life, so I didn't see the sharpest Don. But I did get to his wife has seen, or his widow at the time had seen the tattoo.
Yeah.
And that was all. I was like, that's good enough for me. She knows it's really good, and she knows how much I idolized him. But yeah, he was the perfect for me as a battle rapper growing up, because it was like there was a guy who was mean, but also like very sweet. And so I was always trying to find that middle ground.
Now I get the impetus. I mean, I've admired a lot of people growing up, but I wouldn't put a tattoo on my body at them, you know? I was wondering what the impetus was. So the idea of being critical, highly critical, still funny and sweet, that's the link. That's why.
I would say such terrible things to people on stage. I mean, my entire career was about making people cry, basically. And I was like, you know, trying to find that balance. And then there was this comedian who just did it in such a classy, fun way. And like, that was what spoke to me. And he was more of an influence on me than maybe even some of the rappers that were more in line with what my career was supposed to be. I was like, well, I think this guy's more what I want to be. And it was my dad's guy too. My dad had worked at the Catskills. And so my dad had seen him work, had seen him do stand-up in his like early 20s or whatever age that was. And so my dad was a waiter there. And so it's a lot of connections.
For the Jewish Alps, yeah. I get the sensitivity there with the story I read about you, Shia LaBeouf. Am I pronouncing his name right? But you had offended him, and you felt bad about offending him.
I did. Nowadays, it's not so good to feel any sort of empathy for him because things have sort of turned out very poorly for him. But there was a time when he was doing a press tour, which had a bit of looking for forgiveness. He was kind of a dirtbag, and I had done something to make fun of him very publicly. And it made more press than his original idea. And so I apologized to him there, and he cried, which was amazing. And it was this great feeling. Unfortunately, I think he's a bit of a master manipulator. And so I don't look at that as importantly as I did at one time. But it was I look at it as something I needed to do. So I know that my life has changed since I made fun of him, and I don't do those kind of things as much anymore. So it felt good, even if the subject of it doesn't deserve that. I felt good for myself to at least to have that connection.
We talked about Danielle's directing. Danielle, tell us what you liked about directing and how you got so good at it so soon.
Thank you. I like a lot of things about directing. I am a very logical person, and having to, the coming up with the shots and the organization of breaking down a script, all of that is, in line with me loving math. All of that is the stuff I really like. But there's also the other side of it that's the really creative part and getting good performances out of people. And it's that to me is way more fun than acting. Like getting other people to act in the way that the network and the executives want, that to me is really fun. And
working with kids, it has to be up there.
Number one is working with kids.
Yeah.
Working with, I pretty much exclusively direct children's TV as of right now. And the fact that I get to work with people who were my same age when I started, and I get to basically kind of teach them like acting 101 and entertainment 101. And my hope, of course, is that I am a positive, warm, welcome environment for them to feel like they are able to be themselves and they're able to learn and they're able to thrive without, yelling or being too harsh. Like, I think all kids, we're making TV. We're not, it should be fun. And unfortunately, too many sets just don't have that feeling.
And what other situation, are you able to bring someone in who actually has been in the shoes of the young women so much? And I'm sure Frank has, yelled about this in his life numerous times, but so much of her industry, I learned quickly when we started dating, is older white men who have been doing this since the 80s. And the fact that they've been directing young females for decades and not allowed an actual woman into the space to actually speak directly to the stars is problematic. And so Danielle and a lot of really great female directors have broken through in the last 2 years and found themselves in kids TV. And I think the industry is better for it.
Could you make an argument that not only is being a child actor helpful in being a director of children, but almost a prerequisite?
I wouldn't say a prerequisite exactly, but boy, is it ever extremely helpful. There's a shorthand between me and the actor that if you haven't been a child actor, you just couldn't understand. And I know what it feels like to have the pressure on their shoulders and to also have a life outside of this that they're focused on, and school tutors, and those, and their tutors and their friends back home and the boy they have a crush on, and also the politics of being on a set and who's getting along with who and whose parents are fighting with who. Like, there's a lot of stuff on a child actor's plate, and the fact that I can really understand it and speak to that, I think helps me a lot, because there's already a built-in trust between me and the cast.
And that's why people like Fred Savage, who's had a great career for decades in directing, but honestly, it was a lot of females. Ron Howard, obviously, but then now you and Christine Lincoln and a bunch of people, and Sherry Appleby. Yep. People are starting to find themselves, which is great, child actors directing.
Well, the big thing about Danielle is, of course, she knows where the jokes are. But she was also trained, I would believe, by Joel Zwick, who was our camera guy, our director. He would be in a studio at 6 a.m. to block cameras, and he always did his homework. Even at the age of 75 years old, Joe was the most prepared camera director I've ever seen. And usually you get one person that's good at directing cameras, one person that's good at directing actors, but very few that are good at directing both. And Danielle showed that she has been very good at directing both. So
thank you. But yeah, Joel was the very first person I ever shadowed. And Joel, like you said, he was the first person there and he was the last person to leave. And I would get to set. I also get to sets very early. And so I would get there and I'd get breakfast and I'd walk out to the set and I'd see Joel standing in front of the set, and he was already blocking it, and he was standing in the places, and he was looking stuff, and he was doing his thing. And I was like, oh, I have so much that I can learn from him. And I bought his book. I pre-ordered his book the minute it came out, the same way I bought your book. I like to read as much as I possibly can and learn everything I can. And I've learned so much from you guys.
Well, that's That's great. That's terrific. We got another book coming out, by the way.
Ooh.
Yeah, good
Two
book.
more.
Well, we have 2 more books coming out. The first one is going to be a history. This one is going to be for Jensen.
Okay.
It's a history of the AFL NFL merger.
Great.
Wow.
Great. I love this.
It's
And
called.
it's also, I'm sorry.
It's
Go ahead,
called
Frank.
Gamble, and it's going to be out advanced copies in May.
Lamar's Gamble.
Great.
Lamar's Gamble. It's about Lamar Hunt, obviously, but it's also about corruption in the NFL. I used to be a bookie. I was a bookie in New York, illegal, for a little bit, just for a little bit like I was a bookie. And when I was taking action, I just, it just occurs to me that nothing's on the level when there's a lot of money involved. And this throws a little shade on the NFL.
I just listened to the podcast about the crooked ref, about the NBA.
Tim Donaghy.
I just listened to that podcast, and if you listening to it, you're like, well, he clearly isn't the only ref. I mean, it wasn't a one-time thing.
The best part of that story, I actually wrote a short story about Tim Donaghy. And the best part of the story is at the end of the whole deal, the FBI and the NBA gave him a short sentence because he cooperated.
Yeah.
What he said was, I'm in this alone.
Yeah.
I don't know who gave me the money, but he cooperated. How was that cooperating?
The other thing too is, there's like 40 phone calls between him and referees in the NBA between being caught and going. It's like, and they don't talk about those phone calls. So what is he talking to them about?
Right.
Like, well, what could he be talking to other refs about?
What are you doing this weekend?
Yeah.
But if you get pinched and you're a stand-up guy, the 2 things you say is, I'm in this alone and I don't know who paid me off. But that's exactly what he did. And then the NBA, Stern said, well, he cooperated.
Yeah.
So he got a short set. What he probably said to Stern was, look, if I go down, everybody's going down.
Oh, yeah,
I'm blowing the whistle. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Other than that, it don't make any sense.
Who's the best player to come out of the AFL? Nafluti was Canadian, right? So who was the best player out of that league?
They had a lot of players.
Billy?
Well, they got a lot of great players. Otis Taylor, Darryl LaMonica. I mean, a lot of those guys came out. Stabler, Namath.
I mean, all those teams in the AFL are in the AFC now.
Yeah.
They
Right.
absorb the league.
But it's an interesting take on the merger because my premise is basically, look, the Catholic Church ain't on the level, the government on the level,
Right.
anything with billions of dollars. You want to tell me nobody can get to anybody? Like, it's just like,
Easy. Yeah.
I mean, they only hire guys that have like automatically. I don't care if you run a 4.2. Are you honest? Are you honest? That's not how it works.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's another story. But
That's great.
I got
That's coming out in May.
Yeah, that'll be out. Then we got another
That'll
one
be, out,
coming out.
that'll be out in the summer, followed quickly by Combustible, which is a story loosely based on Billy's life that culminates at 9/11. So,
Wow.
Yeah, I was a firefighter in the South Bronx. But I want to get back to you guys. And one of the things I want to talk about is in Lips, Frank makes a point of saying, and he tells all young actors or wannabe directors or whatever want to be in show business people to be diverse. Go down whatever road opens up. If a door opens, be ready to walk through it. And Jensen, man, I'm looking at you, writer, producer, director, art gallery. I mean, rapper. I mean, all the different things. I mean, so any door that opened, you were ready, man.
Yeah, I mean, truth is, my father was a hustler. My father, was in the schmata business, was, 100% in the kind of Jewish trade of clothing. And that fell apart for him, and it didn't work. And so he, rather than file bankruptcy, he worked on weekends. He sold sweaters at a swap meet that he was able to get wholesale. I mean, some hustle of his. And then, he worked a normal job during the week. I mean, I saw him basically work 7 days a week so that I could wear Air Jordans and not worry about it. I mean, it was like he went out of his way to do that. And I think when the rap thing disappeared for me, there was probably a lot of feeling like that, like I saw growing up. Like, it's just like, well, that just got pulled out from under me. And even though I have a lot of money, that goes fast. And what can I do? And I was not willing to say no to things, which I am lucky to do now. But I think that when the gallery came up and all these different things, I was like, well, I'm not going to put all my eggs in one basket. And I think I learned how to multitask. And I think that I'm good at, maybe seeing if something's good pretty fast and then moving forward with that, or ditching it, or like, I think that I just have always been lucky to keep an open mind.
Yeah. And you're a sports fan as well, right? Clipper fan?
I'm a big Clipper fan. I was lucky when I lost when they fired us from the morning show here in Los Angeles. I was on K-Rock, like I said. When they fired us, I got a job offer the next day to do this podcast with iHeartRadio, which was the Sports Bubble. And it was the week of the NBA shutdown. They asked me to start interviewing athletes about what they're going to do during the break, which now is an obsolete thing. They're all playing. But for about 3 months, I got to talk to athletes when they were home and not knowing what they were going to do. And it's like, I've always loved sports, but having a job where I got to research, like watch things again, and like all these things that I mean, it was such a fun, and the life of a radio guy. I'm sure Jay was ready at any moment to maybe get into sports radio. I mean, it's like you have to know everything in case you get the call. And I just liked doing it, and it was really fun. And I'm a Clipper diehard, like you said, but being able to interview Justin Turner of the Dodgers and Adam Ottavino of the Yankees and Sugar Ray Leonard and all these guys I got to interview because of this Bubble podcast. It was like, man, sports as a job is still something that I don't know if I ever want to do, but it was really fun to live out even for a few months.
Jensen is very inquisitive. And so he's inquisitive about everything. And once he starts talking about something, if he doesn't know enough about it, it doesn't end there with like, wow, I just don't know anything about that. It then becomes, I'm going to have to educate myself on this. How can I participate in this? And that's really, I mean, he's got a million different businesses and he's good at all of them. And it really is just because he never stops learning.
Yeah, but I was reading that about you as well. I could say the same thing. You're super inquisitive. I could see the attraction. I because of Frank, I've been fortunate enough because of this podcast of meeting Joel Swick and Artis Gilmore and yourself. And last week we had Joe West, who was an umpire who was in a similar situation. I
love Joe West.
Yeah, I said you get to talk to every baseball player.
Perfect opportunity to tell Jensen to check out our podcast. It's archived.
That's right. And by the way, I was such a baseball fan growing up that in '89, I believe, they released an umpires set where I could get cards of the umpires. And the reason I know him is because of that set. Like, that's how into baseball I was. I collected the umpire cards.
He's also a country and western singer, of all things.
Right.
And I believe on May 24th this year, he's got a schedule. He's got a schedule since we did it. On May 24th, he's going to break the all-time record currently held by Bill Clem, who died in 1952, of the most games umpired ever in the major leagues.
But I'm in the same position as you. I'm having a ball. I mean, I'm meeting all these people that I would never have an opportunity to meet. I'm just a broken down fireman and an old drunk telling stories about what it was like after he sobered up. You know what I mean? So this has been a ball for me.
And that's the most fun for me. Like what Danielle says, it's like Sugar Ray Leonard is an interview. I can sit there and ask fighting questions but then when I was researching, I found out his dad ran a market. His dad ran a supermarket, and it was like right in the middle of the pandemic. And, never have we called supermarket workers heroes before, but yet we just ignored them. Now we know they're heroes, and now we know what they mean to our neighborhoods. And so I asked him about that. And that's the stuff that even now fuels me. If I could do that, I love that. I wasn't necessarily able to do that as a morning guy all the time, but like I love finding the angle, and I love touching on things that might not be in all the interviews. And that's why the Sports Bubble was so awesome for me.
That's great because, we're talking about heroes. Billy was a 9/11 first responder. Yeah. And when we all know that those firefighters were first responders, the police people were first responders. But Billy said the real heroes there were not the police or the firemen, but the iron workers who cut through the iron. Why don't you expand that a little bit?
Yeah, we were useless without them. I mean, and those guys were working. They were walking off their jobs where they were getting paid X amount of dollars, just showed up at the dig and worked for free to cut that metal so we could get to dig, I mean, they were great, but everybody was amazing in 9/11. But
And those are examples of what's really important in America. Those people are firemen, our policemen, our grocery store workers, our hospital workers. Those are really the most important people. And what we do is we're just lucky enough to be able to have fun for a living.
Yeah, I hate when they think we do something important. That's like the worst feeling in the world for me. They're like, "Oh, we love you on the radio." I was like, "Please don't. I don't. Like, don't love us on the radio." Like, like when the children. So funny, Children's Hospital. When we were going through what we were going through, I would talk about it on the radio. Not a lot, but it would come up every once in a while. Like, yeah, my son's still in the hospital, and I got an email. It was like I got right off the radio, and I look at my email, and it's from the CEO of Children's Hospital. And he says,
he didn't know we were at Children's Hospital.
At all. He just said, "I'm a big fan, and if you need Children's Hospital, I'm here for you." And I go, "We're on the 7th floor." He comes in, and he's like, "Oh, everything's fine. I'm so happy." He goes, "Tell me, so what do you like being on the radio?" I was like, "Sir, no. Like, I don't want to talk. It's not that I just, this is a heaven for us right now."
Yeah.
And the radio is where I go to tell stupid jokes. Two different things. You're a hero. I'm not.
So I think we've taken enough of your time for one day. Derek, do you have any closing questions you want to ask Jensen or Danielle? We can't hear you.
He's muted.
Muted.
All right. Rookie mistake.
By the way, that's our technical guy.
Derek, it happens.
It literally happens every interview we've ever done. To us,
Perfect.
mostly.
I'm glad I could keep up with it. I got a couple questions.
Yeah.
So first of all, does Kanye really owe you $300?
Yes, he owes me
does.
$300. I rented him a car. I'll give you the short end of it, but I rented him a car. He didn't have money for. I held him until a train was closed. We worked until a train was closed, and he was like, "Well, I gotta leave now." And I said, "No, let me rent you a car." Rented him a car. Didn't need the money back. Didn't care, but he just bothered me about it so much, and I'm sure.
Then he kept saying to him, like, "I still owe you that money. I owe you that money." And Jensen was like, "Dude, don't worry about it. I don't need it. I don't need it."
But then when he blows up, I'm like, "I could use it." so we would talk about it, and then he's like, "Okay, I'll bring it to you," and then he never brought it to me, and then he went into outer space, and so we haven't spoken since really he blew up a little at the beginning, but as far as the universe, we haven't spoken. But it's just a funny clickbait title. So.
That's a great title. That's a great title for a book, by the way.
I want it forever, yeah.
Okay, and the next question is, who's your favorite rapper now? Because rap is, I'm 50 years old, and so rap for me is, I was from, I have followed rap since the beginning, since the Sugar Hill Crew and before. So who's your favorite rapper now in this particular rap style?
Here's the thing. I'm disgusting. I listen to everything that comes out.
Everything.
I literally, if a 15-year-old in Iowa some mixtape on SoundCloud, I listen to the whole thing.
Oh, okay.
So it depends on what you're saying. Are you saying who's my favorite rapper that you know, or who's my favorite rapper from this new class?
Well, how about we do both? So why don't you give us an obscure person and then someone who's sort of
Ice Cube is my favorite rapper of all time. I think he's unbelievable. I think he's so consistent, and there's guys like Ice Cube, Method Man, Busta Rhymes, Jay-Z. Those are kind of, and Nas. Those are kind of my main guys. Like they're always good. But when people say rap has changed, it's because a lot of the rap on the radio has changed. So it's not for 50-year-olds or 41-year-olds like me. So like the Baby and these names that are so massive right now, it doesn't, Future even, it doesn't speak to us because it's not for us, right? But there's like hundreds of guys coming up, like all the Griselda guys, Benny the Butcher, and Billy the Butcher. West Side Gun, those guys, that's your whole crew, Billy the Butcher.
That's hilarious.
Those guys, Royce the 5'9", Your Old Droog. There's an entire scene of rappers that are young, but yet are influenced by what we liked. It's just you have to go a little further to find them. But those are all great names. Benny the Butcher, I think, put out the best album of the year last year. And despite the fact that he sounds like he could have been Billy's henchman, he's still very good.
We had a lawyer in the Bronx. He was named Never Worry Murray. Never Worry Murray.
That's a great name. Yeah, those Griselda guys. Those are my guys to follow. And Freddie Gibbs. Freddie Gibbs is amazing as well.
Perfect. All
That's
right,
great.
excellent. I have some more questions, but we've gone a little long, so
Billy, you have a question, Billy? Closing question?
No, man, I just want to tell you what a ball I had. You guys are just both great. I mean, it's like I feel like I know you all my life. I mean, just a lot of fun to be with.
Thank
So
you.
thanks.
So happy
Thanks.
you did this, yeah.
Danielle, I love Danielle. I love you to death. You know that.
I love Frank.
And Jensen, can you do a little freestyle to send us off? A little
I'm so bad.
a little Mike freestyle to send us off.
I mean,
it's been a long time.
No, here's the thing. I always say at 41 years old, it's very difficult because there's not a lot that rhymes with mortgage. It's like a total bummer. But listen, we spoke for 2 hours and the whole thing was a trip. So make sure when you download podcasts, it's Mook and a Mick.
All right.
Excellent.
Guys, thanks so much for coming on. We really appreciate it greatly.
Thank
No
you
worries.
so much.
Take care, guys.
That's great. Thank you so
Bye.
much. A
Bye.
pleasure
Thank
meeting
you.
Real pleasure.
Billy, Derek, they were great, weren't they?
Yeah,
Yes, they were.
dynamic. Both of them are dynamic. What really floored me is they're both interested in so many different things. You know, I like that curiosity in people.
Yeah. I'm interested in how that backdrop changed on you, but that's another story. But I think you're shooting with green screen today.
I'm in the Bat Cave. Today. You didn't know I was a superhero. I'm Fake Man. Fake Man is my new name.
Speaking of superheroes, that will get us into a new segment called Florida Man. And each week we'll pick out a Florida man of note and we'll comment on it. Derek's going to pick out a Florida man of note and we'll comment on it. So anytime you're ready, Derek, you can show. Okay, Florida man groped Disney World princess as his wife sat next to him. So
Anybody you know, Billy?
Yeah, he looks like he's on a level. That guy looks like he's not a suspect.
So
looks like a citizen.
oh, that's crazy. Florida man.
Well, last week we were talking about getting syringes up your ass, so I think that's even worse. This guy's mild compared to last week.
So what did you see for Florida man today? What did you send me today, Billy?
Was in today's news too. I mean, this is right on CNN this morning. The guy was looking for his golf ball, right, on a Florida course, and he drowned. They found his 9-iron. Then they found the body about 3 hours later. He fell into a lake and drowned, looking for a golf ball.
Well, it could have been worse. He could have been eaten by a gator.
Gator. But at least if you get eaten by a gator, at least you got an excuse. You know, the gator flew out. I was in Australia. I got to tell you this because tell you how fast these suckers are. And they don't have gators. They have crocs, and crocs are aggressive. And there's a big difference. Matter of fact, the only places that gators and crocs coexist is in the Everglades in Florida. But anyway, I digress. I'm in Australia, and it was about 8 firemen. We go to this crocodile farm. And there's crocs all over the place. And then there's this one big swimming pool with an iron gate around it, iron bars around it. And it has Jumbo on the thing, right? So I said, well, we got to see Jumbo, So we're sitting back from the bars, standing back from the bars. And the guy says, all right, it's feeding time. And he takes a chicken and he wrings its neck and he just smacks it on the water. And I swear to God, Frank, these 2 eyes came out of the water, and the 2 eyes were as big as soccer balls. I mean, they were big, and nothing, just the eyes. All you could see was the eyes. And then the guy says, watch this. And he throws the chicken. And this thing was prehistoric. I mean, it must have been 27 feet long. Leaped out of the water and grabbed that chicken in the air. And we were like 10 feet back behind the knife, and all of us jumped like, what? All of us almost freaked. If you're next to an alligator, I don't give a shit if you see that thing. If it wants you, you're done. I mean, you ever see the way a salamander or a newt eats a bug? Like an eyeball's over something, goes, bloop, and that's exactly the way they move. I mean, they just, whoop, you're done. You have no shot. No shot.
So that gave new meaning. That Australia trip gave new meaning to wringing out the chicken, huh?
My guy wrung out the chicken. I think that's enough stories about my adventures in Australia.
I
That's
think
a great guest, Frank. Really.
That's enough stories for this week. Next week, our guest will be Jay Kernis, producer for CBS Sunday Morning, the national show, which is a terrific show. Everybody should watch it. CBS Sunday Morning. It's a great, great show. So that's it for Billy, Derek, and me. We'll see you all next week. Remember, if these lips could talk, and archive the Mika Mook and a Mike, and pretty soon coming Lamar's Gamble. So we'll be all over you again to buy a second book and a third book and a fourth book. So
keep those cards and letters coming in, folks.
Cards and letters coming, and Billy, we'll try to get you a backdrop for next week also. We'll put you to Hawaii next week.
Thanks very much for looking in, everybody. We really appreciate it. Really.
Thank you, Derek.
Thank you, Derek. Thanks, Frankie. Good guess, man. Good way to go.
We'll see you next week.